Hello, good evening and welcome to Biz1st Review 360, your weekly roundup of the top business news and developments impacting the Sri Lankan economy. Eventful only begins to describe this week in Sri Lanka. We saw the launch of the Vision 2025 policy document, a document that aims to outline the government's vision to become a competitive, knowledge-based social market economy by 2025. Also this week, we had explosive revelations coming from the Presidential Commission of Inquiry on Bond Issuances, where it was revealed that Arjun Aloysius had access to sensitive inside information ahead of the controversial bond issuance. Also this week, Field Marshal Salath Fonseca levelled war crimes allegations against former Army Commander General Jagat Jayasuriya. We have more on the Vision 2025 policy documents coming up later on in the program, but first, a quick look at this week's top stories.
Parliament Thursday passed a new inland revenue law aimed at tax reforms, which is expected to simplify the tax system and increase government revenue. The law was passed with 90 voting for and 25 against in the third reading.
The existing Inland Revenue Act is an outdated act that had gone through many amendments. It is complex, difficult to understand and implement. The Sri Lankan economy has translated from a low-income country to a middle-income level. As in the case of many legislative enactments, the existing Inland Revenue Act too has evolved over 4 decades and more, and stands more outdated. Even the principal enactment of 2006 has gone through 9 amendments by now. There were piecemeal amendments. These were piecemeal amendments which were done to address the issues and concerns that arose at different circumstances and without any holistic review or appreciation of possible implications. Thus, the Act itself has become very complex, difficult to understand and confusing. It has also created loopholes and opportunities for many to escape the tax net and thereby creating a very unfair playing field. As a result, Sri Lanka lags behind its peers in ease of doing business in view of the existence of a very complex tax law. This has made tax payment very difficult, costly and time consuming. Both local and foreign businesses find the Inland Revenue Act as a serious impediment that requires immediate change. The new Inland Revenue Bill looks at the issue of taxation from a novel and modern perspective and meet in the current status of our economy. It is a simple, easy to understand that encourages compliance by all rational taxpayers.
According to the Finance Ministry, the Inland Revenue Act is expected to increase government revenue by at least 45 billion rupees per year.
In a bid to woo South Asian investors, Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe told the SAARC Trade Fair and Investment Forum 2017 that the government is working on easing barriers to business and developing the island's port infrastructure.
We are now examining the Ministry of Development Strategy, Ministry of Finance and my ministry. We are examining the barriers to business and how we may make one leap forward in the ease of doing business. That's the first one. We are looking at connectivity. So we have plans now to develop the Colombo port further, the development of Hambantota and the development of the Trincomalee ports. I think we have all got to agree on the ease of doing business in South Asia and get all governments to implement that criteria. But what matters most is the ease of doing business. The connectivity. Tax does not matter. Some can tax highly, some can tax low, some can give tax concessions. That's a difference. That depends on your competitiveness also. But certainly connectivity is important. And you cannot have connectivity without ease of doing business. There are other connectivity, the infrastructure of ports and the airports, but all that increases only if there is ease of doing business.
Premier Wickremesinghe told the gathering that Sri Lanka's close proximity to fast-growing big markets clear market access to Europe, and negotiations on free trade agreements will make Sri Lanka an ideal destination for investment.
Then by 2030, India, Pakistan and Bangladesh will be among the top 32 countries. It is at present stage of affairs. Just imagine what your growth will be if you have removed all these constraints. Then we see the regional comprehensive economic agreement, cooperation agreement being put together by ASEAN. Let's say that comes into being. It will. And what if we join them? Because our region doesn't end in Bangladesh. It extends further down to Australia. If you unleash our potential and link it up with these countries, destiny should be unkind, very unkind to us if we can't become the fastest growing region. We are clearing the markets. We've already got GSP Plus from the European Union. We are negotiating a free trade agreement with Singapore, another with China, and we want to deepen the FTA with India into economic and technology cooperation agreements. All should be in place by next year. Then we are looking at deepening some of the existing FTAs also in South Asia, and we are looking at some other Southeast Asian countries to enter into free trade agreements, but we'll also look at the progress of the regional comprehensive economic partnership. In this way we will add connectivity in the middle of the Indian Ocean, moving out towards East Africa later on.
A report by the Oxford Business Group says increased access for air travellers, strong advertising campaigns and enhanced bilateral cooperation are underpinning Sri Lanka's push to expand its foothold in one of the world's largest potential tourism source markets. This is because both the private sector players and public officials in Sri Lanka see the country's northern neighbour India as a key source of growth in the coming years, central to increasing foreign arrivals beyond 3 million a year by 2020. India is already Sri Lanka's leading source of overseas visitors, accounting for more than 17.4% of inbound traffic in 2016. Experts say Sri Lanka may struggle to achieve the Sri Lanka Tourism Development Authority's goal of attracting 2.5 million overseas tourists in 2017, though recent results put the industry well on its way to surpassing last year's 1.8 million and close to breaking the 2 million barrier. Officials hope that deepening ties with India's tourism industry will further strengthen arrival numbers. Under a new joint initiative with India's Kerala state agreed in mid-July, the two countries are working to broaden the range of attractions on offer in a bid to keep holidaymakers in the region longer.
You're a catalyst to your happiness, you know.
Welcome back to the program. One could be forgiven if they lost track of the number of economic policy documents that we've seen under this government, the latest being the Vision 2025 strategy. Joining us with more perspective on this latest policy document is former Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, Dr. W.A. Vijayawardena.
To make sense of this policy document, we have with us one of our frequent contributors, Dr. Vijayawardena, former Deputy Governor of the Central Bank. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Ramesh.
Dr. Vijayawardena, could you tell us, now Vision 2025 was launched early this week. How significant is it? How relevant is it to launch a policy document at this time?
In fact, Ramesh, now this type of vision should have been announced by the government at the start of beginning of the government in 2015. This has been presented midway through, and what I find, Ramesh, is that it's actually linked to the country's election cycle. Because the particular 2025 vision has two categories. One is an intermediate target, which the government is planning to achieve by year 2020, and the other one is the final target, which the government is planning to attain in year 2025, and both 2020 and 2025 are election years in Sri Lanka. So what I feel is that this particular document has been prepared by the government in expectation of submitting certain achievements by the government to the electorate by the time the government faces the new elections, which should not be the case. Because if you want to prepare an economic plan for any country, it should be a long-term plan which should be free from the electoral cycle of the country, and therefore in that sense I think this particular plan has a drawback in the sense in year 2020 if another government comes to power, this particular plan will be thrown out by the new government. So therefore it will not be implemented continuously as envisaged by the government when it introduced 2 days ago.
Now it's been about 2.5 years after this government came into power. If memory serves correct, this is not the first development policy plan that this government has produced.
Yeah, you are correct, Ramesh, because this is actually the fourth plan which the present government has produced, because the first plan was the manifesto of the United National Party presented to the electorate in August 2015, wherein the government said that it would introduce knowledge-based, highly competitive social market economy to Sri Lanka, and based on that it will attain a high economic growth for the country. Then 2 months after that, in November 2015, the Prime Minister for the first time made the first economic policy statement in Parliament. Then in 2016 also in October, he made another economic policy statement in Parliament. That was the third one. But what I find is that all the three statements the government had made, there was no any connection, no coherence, and they were independent, stand-alone policy documents, and therefore there was no any connection. And usually when a government comes up with a plan like this, Ramesh, there must be, when you present the next second plan, there must be a section where you will be reviewing the targets of the first plan, how many targets that you have attained, and what are the reasons for failure of any targets, and what are the remedial measures that you would be undertaking in order to correct the situation. Now, we don't have that kind of a structure in the present Vision 2025 of any of the two previous statements made by the Prime Minister. So therefore we have to take this as a stand-alone policy statement which the government has presented to the electorate in its midway course.
Now you mentioned, Doctor, in one of your earlier responses the term knowledge-based economy.
Yeah.
Does this vision still drive the country towards this?
Exactly. The main strategy which the government says which wants to attain this Vision 2025 is by creating a knowledge-based, highly competitive social market economy. That is the economic philosophy governing the present 2025 vision. And of course, since we have two major political parties formed into a coalition government today, it is highly essential that both parties will have to sign off that they agree to this social market economy policy. Otherwise, what would happen is the United National Party might say that we are going to attain the social market economy policy, and the Sri Lanka Freedom Party might say no, we are not subscribing to that. So in order to implement the plan successfully, there must be a coherence and agreement between the two parties about this social market economy policy.
Now, during the recent SAARC investment forum, most of the ministers that spoke said they were targeting development activities when it comes to upgrading telecommunications, the energy sector, building new LNG plants, and so on and so forth. But for all these development activities to happen, you need foreign direct investments. How has the performance of foreign direct investments been since this government came into power?
Yeah, in the past, it is a very dismal record, Ramesh, because historically, of course, Sri Lanka had not been able to attract sufficient amount of foreign direct investments. Always our foreign direct investment had been less than $1 billion per annum, always. During the last 2 years, of course, it was worse because the amount that we had attracted was about between 500 million to 800 million US dollars, and even then they had come not for the strategic type of industries which Sri Lanka needs today. They had come for the hospitality industry and also the real estate industry. And already the central bank has made the announcement that the real estate has become a bubble today, and the bubble might burst at any time. Even the current Vision 2025 had recognized it, and it says that it wants to change the foreign direct investment from the real estate sector to knowledge-based high-tech sector, so that we will be able to generate a sufficient amount of goods and services for export to the rest of the world.
Why do you think Sri Lanka is not attracting foreign direct investments? Is it a management problem with regard to the government?
It's actually it's a complex problem, because one thing is Sri Lanka is ranked very low in ease of doing business index compiled by the World Economic Forum, and when it comes to all kinds of government bodies, regulatory bodies, electricity board, even the available infrastructure facilities, they are not up to the level where the foreign investors would be attracted to this country. And therefore we have to first action we have to take in order to attract these foreign direct investments, increase them to 5 billion US dollars by year 2020 as envisaged in the Vision 2025. The first thing that we have to do is we have to undertake a massive economic reform program. Education system will have to be reformed, healthcare system will have to be reformed, infrastructure facilities will have to be provided, low and cheap and reliable energy will have to be supplied to the investors, and at the same time the regulatory mechanism has to be completely changed. For example, one reason why Sri Lanka is ranked very low in the ease of doing business index is the Ceylon Electricity Board, because it says that in Sri Lanka, for a new business to get electricity connection, it takes about 100 days and at a cost of 4.5 million rupees. 4.5 million rupees is a very high amount, and specifically when it comes to small and medium enterprises, it's a prohibitive cost for them. So that is why it is necessary for Sri Lanka to reform the entire energy sector in order to attract the foreign direct investment. So it's a management as well as a historically complex problems that we are facing.
Okay, Dr. Vijayawardena, we are going in for a short commercial break. We will be back on the other side with more from Dr. Vijayawardena on Vision 2025. Welcome back. This is Biz1st Review 360. We are in conversation with Dr. W. Vijayawardena, former Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. Doctor, we were talking about Vision 2025 before we went in for a commercial break. This economic policy plan that has been developed and was presented by the President and the Prime Minister together, do you think that the general public will actually benefit from this plan, and do you think that they can actually understand the contents of this plan?
Well, Ramesh, if it is implemented to the letter, of course the general public will benefit it, because the plan envisages to take Sri Lanka from a lower middle income country to a rich country, a developed country within a matter of say 8 years time. So,
but with the track record of this government,
not only this government, Sri Lanka's track record is, as I said, very dismal, because we have not been able to attain an economic growth of more than 4.5% over the entire post-independence period. And for us to do this miracle of elevating Sri Lanka to the rich country club by year 2025, the minimum economic growth during 2018 and 2025 should be 15% per annum, which is totally unattainable and totally unrealistic. But of course, if the targets and the goals of the Vision 2025 are attained, the whole population will benefit out of that, because Sri Lanka will be the first country in the world which has been able to become a developed country within a matter of 8 years period. So it's a record. As you said, that the understanding of the plan is a must, because plan has been prepared in highly technical terms, and even the parliamentarians may find it difficult to understand the high economic technical terms, and my suggestion is that the government should immediately start classes, training classes for parliamentarians, so that they would be able to understand every nitty-gritty of the plan that the government has produced, so that they will be able to speak with a single voice. With the one voice, they will be able to speak and they will be able to defend the plan. So it must be both for the United National Party parliamentarians and the SLFP parliamentarians. And for the general public also, we have to do little more, and this has to be converted into the simplest language possible, and it has to be explained. Every paragraph has to be explained to the general public. Otherwise, what would happen is, the most of the proposals that had been presented in the Vision 2025 would be objected to by the trade unions and the general public. For example, there is a suggestion that we must go for a contributory pension scheme for the whole country. I mean, whenever such a thing is proposed, always the general public and trade unions will immediately go to streets and they will object to that. So to avoid that, it is also necessary within the next 2 to 3 month period. The whole plan will have to be explained in simple terms to the members of the public, so that they can understand it. And if we want to make any protest promise, they will do so with informed knowledge rather than
being misinformed by other parties.
Yes.
Now, free trade agreements is a term that the Prime Minister, the Minister in charge of Development Strategies and International Trade, as well as his Deputy Minister, keep going on about. They speak about free trade agreements with China, free trade agreements with countries like Singapore. And do you think that free trade agreements is the right way to go for Sri Lanka? Will it actually benefit Sri Lanka, or will it actually have a negative effect on the country?
Well, of course, in the 2025 vision, Ramesh, the main thrust has been to go into this kind of trade agreements with the rest of the world. But in my view, when we call it free trade agreement, it's a very narrow concept. And what we have to look at today is a kind of an economic cooperation agreement, where we would be connecting not only goods that are produced in Sri Lanka with the rest of the world, we are connecting even the services and the technology that is being produced in the rest of the world with Sri Lanka. Because the main strategy which the Vision 2025 is going to use for attaining this high rich country status by 2025 is to develop Sri Lanka as a global production network. Which means, Ramesh, we are producing not the whole product in Sri Lanka, we are producing a single part, and we produce it for the rest of the world, and we supply it to the rest of the world, and we are making money out of the volume, not out of the profit that we make on a single product. So in order to do that, we have to have the trade, not the trade agreement, the cooperation agreements with the rest of the world, like India, China, Singapore, even Malaysia, which are presently on the global production network. For example, if you take this iPhone or any Apple product, Ramesh, even though Apple iPhone is assembled in a factory in China called Foxconn, there are about 435 production units located throughout the world which are supplying parts to the iPhone. Now, presently, most of the countries in the Asian region which supply those parts are Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, Taiwan, South Korea, Hong Kong and Japan. So, if we want to join the production line, we have to first join a country like Singapore. So that we will be supplying it to Singapore, and Singapore will supply to the Chinese factory.
Right.
So that can happen only with cooperation agreements.
What is the worst case scenario for Sri Lanka?
Worst case scenario here, of course, if you look at the particular plan, as I told you, highly ambitious, because highly ambitious means no country had become a developed country within a matter of 8-year period. And we don't have resources, nor do we have the managerial skills to manage that kind of a development process. Third one is that in Sri Lanka, the worst encounter that anyone would have with Sri Lanka is the policy inconsistency and policy unpredictability, because nobody can predict what the government would do tomorrow, because it will be totally inconsistent with what the government has done yesterday. So because of these reasons, if the particular plan is not properly implemented, what would happen is Sri Lanka would move further down from the current stage of economic development, and we would be actually destined as a developing nation forever. That is the worst case.
The worst case scenario to remain as a developing country.
As a developing nation, because even 1948 we were a developing nation, 1970 we were a developing nation, and here even 2025 will be a developing nation.
What about public-private partnerships? Do you honestly think that is the way forward?
That is also one of the strategies in the 2025 vision, because the one reason is that public sector in Sri Lanka has lots of resources, but it doesn't have the financial capability, nor does it have the managerial capability, and also it doesn't have the market access. Because of these reasons, with foreign countries, with foreign industrial firms, if the government can provide the land and other infrastructure facilities, and those people will bring technology, market access and managerial know-how, then it will be an ideal production situation, because most of the countries which had been developed had used this particular type of economic strategy to push them towards a higher economic growth within a short period of time, and Singapore is one of the best examples in the region.
That is, provided that the government can provide all these.
Government has to. I mean, lots of other things will have to be done, Ramesh, because the corruption has to be eliminated. Then the inefficiency in the public sector will have to be eliminated, and it should be made an efficient public sector, and investors should not go from one place to another to get approvals. There must be a single place where they would get the approval within a short period of time, and all other facilities must be made available for public-private partnership to succeed.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vijayawardena, for joining us this evening. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have. I'm Ramesh Bandara. This is Biz1st Review 360.
So, will the Vision 2025 strategy come to fruition? Only time will tell. Don't forget to look us up on Facebook. You'll find us at Biz1st Review 360. I'll see you again, same time, same place next week. Good night and good luck.